You're listening to Music Tectonics.
It's the rock paper scanner. Welcome back to Music Tectonics, where we go beneath the surface of music tech. I'm your host, Dmitri. I'm also the founder and CEO of Rock Paper Scissors, the PR firm that specializes in music tech, music innovation, and also some marketing stuff too. And I've got our other host with us. It's Tristra.
Yay. Hi, Dmitri. How are you doing?
Tristra New Year Yeager, the Chief Strategy Officer at Rock Paper Scissors.
Yeah, you were trying to get me to introduce myself, and
I don't know.
I refused.
It's always trouble when you get Tristra and Dmitri crazy pants on the same podcast, but sometimes we just got to do it. And we are both kind of fanatics about just seeing what's going on in the music industry, in music tech, but also the wider industry, the recording industry, the musical instrument and production side of things, and all the parallel universes. And we've been launched a rock paper scanner newsletter. It's a newsletter where you can see the 20 to 30 to 40 articles that we're coming across and helping you kind of see what's happening right now in the industry and what's coming in the future. And so this rock paper scanner edition, this rock paper scanner edition of Music Tectonics is an opportunity for us to go through some of the stuff we've been scanning in last week's newsletter. And you can sign up for it. Just check out the podcast notes. If you go to musictectonics.com, you can sign up. It's the first link you'll see in the notes. And you can sign up and every week have the same information that we're looking at. So we thought we'd go through, 3, 4, 5 of the big topics that are hitting right now. And of course, we're recording this a little bit earlier than you're going to hear it. So who knows? Everything could change by the time we say it, but hopefully there's still some relevance here. Tristra,
Yes.
The thing that keeps popping up in the scanner every week for a while now is Universal Music and TikTok playing a game of chicken.
Yes.
And I think this week we usually don't try to have too many of the same topic, but there's little nuances in each of the articles that we found this week. One of them is specifically about the UMPG, the publishing side, starting to get removed because originally it was the record label side. But what's interesting about the publishing side is that it's impacting more than just Universal Music label artists as well.
Yeah, and I've seen some interesting figures. The more conservative estimate was something like 50% of the tracks on TikTok to as high as 80%. I'm not exactly sure how these calculations are being made, but I think Tim Ingham in Music Business Worldwide had a rundown of exactly how big the scope of UMPG was, and it was pretty astonishing, even if it's on the low end.
That's the article that I pulled for this week is actually a Music Ally article, Stuart Dredge. TikTok is removing tracks using UMPG controlled compositions is the title, but he actually cites that Tim Ingham thing. And then it's basically a battle between, how much impact is this having? Stu says an MBW report earlier this month suggested that it could be as much as 80% of, quote, relevant repertoire, end quote, on TikTok. However, the company is now pushing back on that stat. According to TikTok, UMG and UPMG's catalogs combined represent between 20 and 30% of, quote, popular songs, depending on territory. And he says the phrases relevant repertoire and popular songs are doing a lot of the work there, which is very Stuart Dredge,
yes,
in my opinion.
Gotta love Stu.
But yeah, so it's interesting. Both you're seeing this game of chicken widen out to these, these publishing composition component of the TikTok catalog, and then so then there's this continued battle basically about who needs who more. Does UMG need TikTok more? Or does TikTok need UMG more? And then we pulled a couple of articles that are both talking about the power of TikTok or the opposite of that, or the waning power of TikTok, and then also about what the impact is beyond in the industry. So Billboard did an article about Beyonce's TikTok takeover, proving the platform power persists.
A lot of alliteration there, Billboard. That's excellent. I love it.
Well, that was in their title. Yeah, it was. It does.
Persistent platform power proved.
Persists. Proven. By Beyonce. And then you pointed out there's also this Pew Research study that kind of is saying a slightly different narrative. What was that one saying?
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. It wasn't talked about a ton in the music industry, but a lot of the sort of internet culture commentariat was diving into it and noticing that TikTok does not equal Gen Z the way a lot of advertisers and other folks assume, that in fact TikTok is mostly millennials right now. And another really interesting thing, and this isn't completely relevant to the conversation, but most people who have a TikTok account don't actually ever post anything; they just look at stuff. And that's really, really interesting too. So it's kind of, there's some questions right now in the internet sort of, I don't know, it used to be called criminology, right? Like sort of trying to guess what's going on behind the curtain. But I think a lot of people are very curious about, like, is TikTok maturing? Is it going to become less of a hot commodity? Is it going to become less useful for people and therefore less attractive? Or are there certain niches that are going to be really, really important, but that in general, it's not going to be this sort of be all and end all that a lot of people have assumed? I think it's a really interesting moment for TikTok too. They're rolling out things like a lot of social commerce, live streaming commerce, all of these things that have been really effective in China, for example, where there's like a talent agency constellation of like 25,000 agencies that run live streamers and do online commerce in this really specific way. And I don't, and that hasn't quite caught on here yet. And it seems like TikTok's really trying to figure out how to crack the U.S. market in particular when it comes to social commerce. So it's a really, really interesting time for TikTok, and the fact that there's this dispute around music and music rights is also really interesting. Like, will this fight with UMG, have TikTok pivot to something that's much more like a Douyin kind of app? Or will it just completely go back to being music-based and everything will get resolved and the music industry will be even more in love with TikTok, more excited about Discover? I don't know. It's like a really interesting question. And maybe by the time this podcast comes out, it'll all be it could be resolved, but I think it's a longer term question. Yeah.
I mean, the longer term question is really about the value of music and the way that technology and social platforms use music. People want to engage in music in this very interactive way where it's part of this, this digital community interaction, this building memes and videos and trends and things where music's a critical part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's these other pressures like AI and will there be a different type of rights holder as a result, or no rights holders as a result of the flooding of additional types of music and so forth. But it's really, this isn't the first time that a large tech and social platform has had to kind of go head to head with a label or labels and music rights holders. I mean, it took a while for I think the labels to get, I don't know if comfortable is the right word, but to accept what's going on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and Twitter. And Twitter, I'm still not sure that anyone's happy, but
no one knows what's going on there.
Right. But it's this continued free market tension / conversation / negotiation that happens. And it'll be interesting. I think what's interesting to me about the UMG TikTok one is this is the first time we have a Chinese company that's negotiating with the major labels. And there may be some cultural differences in terms of the interpretation of how business negotiations happen that make this a longer tie, basically like a standstill of this. It might take longer as a result. I mean, a couple of the articles we pulled that are relevant here was another Music Ally piece. Kim Petras defends UMG over TikTok. The intentions are noble. And I think that's interesting there's a lot of artists who are unhappy that their release plans and their promotion plans and their community building and their own influence has been put on hold because of weaker links to Universal. They might not be a Universal Music Group label artist, but they might be distributed by a company, or they might have now a co-writer who's a UMPG or something like that. But yet you also have artists who are saying, well, no, actually, I do kind of want somebody. I want somebody with some strength in the market, kind of protecting the idea that music needs to be paid for when it gets used. And then you have this Billboard piece that Elias Light wrote, Universal's music isn't on TikTok, but artists keep using it anyway. So on the one hand, you have some artists who are like, oh, thank goodness somebody's fighting for us. And then you have others artists, some of whom are Universal artists who are working around the kind of the standstill here, doing things like releasing things on TikTok before the actual release is out to build up audience and interest even before it's
But there was some great phone calls after that one.
I'm sure there were. Or releasing acoustic versions or sped up versions, which, those things are trendy to do anyway. That's been kind of a growth area anyway. But it's super interesting to see that that's a workaround for the impasse between UMG and TikTok as well.
Well, it's also speaking both of those examples you just gave of Kim Petras and often much more emerging or newer artists using TikTok regardless of what the label says. Like both of those sort of speak to the artist-label relationship shifts that we're seeing, right? So everyone's asking, like, what is a label going to do for me? And the label says, I'm going to go to bat and, negotiate on your behalf with a big old other corporation, which is, exciting because as a single artist, you really can't get TikTok to do anything. So it's almost like, you've got an industry group that's representing your business. And then there's these other artists who are like, I have to steer my own ship. I have to keep my own audience. I have to take responsibility for my career no matter what my label does. So I'm going to go a little bit rogue here or I'm going to, toe the line and get right up to the edge of what's acceptable and just keep engaging my audience because, ultimately that is all I got. It kind of points out the lines that delineate the artist-label relationship and how they're getting gray and a little confusing.
Well, but even some of the label artists are also still doing this stuff as well, which is kind of interesting. It's that tension of sort of like who's adding more value, the label and the artist, or the streaming, the video streaming service, and there's just this back and forth. It's super. I don't know, maybe it's inside baseball for anyone who's not in the music industry, but it's super interesting to see it play out. We've seen it play out and have different results, but YouTube created their content ID system under a similar kind of circumstance, which was saying, oh, well, we're going to open up enough of a door that you can generate revenue from your music being used on user-generated videos. And not as much as on audio streaming services, not getting paid as much. But then there's that kind of promotion aspect and that viral aspect that can take place on YouTube. So, but I have a hunch TikTok's going to end differently, and I'm not sure what it is, but I just feel like it feels a little different because there's already enough other Instagram Reels and YouTubes out there that Universal can say, well, you know what? If you don't want to use our content, there's some other places for us to go. And with the conversation about is TikTok's strength waning a little bit, and YouTube and Instagram has some maturity that maybe their audiences are going to stick around already for a bit.
Yeah. Instagram, too, has been really pushing music inclusion on Reels. So they're like, don't you want to add music? You really do want to add music, don't you? Come on, you want some music? Maybe some music here. At least that's how it feels for me personally as a user. I don't know what everyone else has felt, but it seems like they're really, really wanting you to add music, which is kind of interesting, instead of using the original sound.
Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk about this news that Spotify has generated a lot more money for independent music artists. We'll be right back.
What are you planning for South by Southwest week? It's coming up fast. Help your music tech friends find your event in Austin this March. Tell us about your panels, meetups, parties, and activations for music tech innovators in Austin, and we'll add them to our unofficial guide and spread the word to the music tectonics community. There's a link to submit your event on the blog at musictectonics.com, or find Music Tectonics on LinkedIn, Instagram, and X. The submission link is in our profiles. Want to get your hands on the unofficial guide? Make sure you're signed up for the Music Tectonics newsletter at musictectonics.com. We'll email you when it's ready.
Okay, we are back, and this is a blast. We were talking all through the UMG TikTok tensions and that conversation, how that's unfolding. Another interesting thing came out this week, Tristra, that I'd love to get your take on. Music Ally's article was Spotify says independent music generated half of its 2023 payouts. And then specifically, the Billboard piece headline was Spotify paid out a record $4.5 billion to independent labels and publishers in 2023. And there's this ongoing conversation about the power of the independents and also the growth of the market share. And the flip side is people saying, oh, the market share of the majors is going down over time and so forth. But what was your takeaway on the news about the independent strength in the 2023 numbers?
I mean, this fits in with the trends that people like Mark Mulligan have been pointing to for like 5 years, 10 years, a gazillion years.
Yeah. It's been a while.
So it's interesting that we're at this moment where it's like 50-50, and where will it go from here? The other thing, though, that I've seen is that while this looks really impressive, it's like, oh, wow, half the music is going to indie artists and publishers. The overall consensus that I've seen from indie publishers and labels is that the average per stream rate has gone down slightly. So it's like 8% less. It's not a huge dip, but it still kind of signals that maybe this isn't completely as rosy a picture as people want to paint. The other thing that's interesting is I've seen some calculations that so it's $9 billion total. The idea that, majors got half and the indie sector got half. But what about the fraud sector? And that's been a big topic of conversation lately. And that if that's 10%, as BeatDap estimates, so we got to take out a whole big chunk there of $900 million. And so it's actually 4.05 or whatever billion dollars that went to indies. So some interesting, whenever these figures come out, again, a lot of interesting conversations spring up from people who are stakeholders or have a different perspective on all of this. But in general, because there are more and more artists out there who are independent, the overall slice of the pie is getting more and more slender. But I also saw some really enthusiastic reactions from some larger either label groups or independent labels that were really psyched about this and really felt like really validated by these numbers that their mission of kind of pursuing this independent vision of supporting artists who have either really specific kind of creative output or, that fall outside of what the majors are interested in. This is really, they feel really like justified in their position. And I think that's cool too. It's great to hear somebody enthusiastic about the state of music and hopeful for the future that they'll be able to put some good stuff out there. So yeah, it's an interesting. Those statistics always bring out a whole chorus of voices, and it's always very interesting to listen into the different sides.
I'm interested in also. It feels like there's more of a diversification of genre that's happening overall, and that this. I would assume that having more diverse players in terms of record labels and all the teams around artists would lead to the opportunity for different niches, different genres to kind of rise in terms of their following and as well as their payouts and so forth. So I'm assuming this is a sign, that a growth in the independent sector is also meaning that there's less of a top-down approach to what kind of music people are hearing. If you think about the traditional model of commercial radio for a long time was what broke music, and then MTV for a while, and then all these other things. But even with what we were talking about with TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, you have a more diverse set of creators and producers who are bringing music to light, to audiences. And so I don't know, I don't have the science to back that, but I would assume that as we see a growth in the independent sector by using the numbers of payouts and streams and so forth, that's a sign that there's more diverse types of music getting listened to and getting out there as well. Yeah,
it is hopeful. It's hopeful for all my, poo-pooing about, where's the fraud and in that calculation and the per stream rate is going down. There's still a lot of really exciting stuff happening.
I wondered if the 8% decrease in payout was that across the independent sector, or that was like per stream? Because if it was across the independent sector, it makes me wonder about whether Spotify's news at the end of the year in November, where they were. I don't know when this kicked in, when they were saying they're not going to pay for any streams, any royalties for songs that stream under 1,000 streams per year or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a really great question, and I don't know if that 8% decrease. I think it was an average per stream rate, because the per stream rate is never the same. The per stream rate is calculated in a variety of different ways based on the user and the market and all sorts of other things. So it's difficult to say, there is no one per stream rate. But there tends to be there's a little tick downwards is what some creators have noticed.
Kind of a related story, since we're talking about kind of the payouts. Chris Eggertson at Billboard broke the story that songwriters and publishers are due nearly $400 million after final streaming royalty rate determination. And it kind of just goes into a little bit more detail about that. But it's interesting to see that, more revenues getting unlocked through this process. Through partially through just the establishment of the Mechanical Licensing Collective, but also the switch of the Phono 3 blanket license period of 21 to 22 finally kind of getting released of what those are going to be, saying the MLC reports that digital service providers like Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, and Pandora underpaid rights holders by $419.2 million, $281 million from mechanical royalties, and $137.8 million from performance royalties. Those underpayments were due to the fact that final rates were higher than the interim rates during the more than 4-year royalty dispute between publishers and streamers. So it's not like they were wrong to not pay it, but it does mean it's a bit of a windfall now that the payment rates have been settled for a previous period.
Yeah, and it's also really amazing how, we're finally, I think in some ways there was all this stuff put into place by the MMA, and we're finally getting to a point where we're starting to reap the benefits of it, where there's a structure in place that's pretty transparent, where payouts are flowing because rates have been determined, and there've been so many little pauses and holdups and wait a seconds here. And now at last things are kind of moving along. So we'll see in a year or two how people are feeling and thinking about this system. But it seems like the problem of digital mechanicals is getting to be less of a problem, which is good.
And a lot of the problem is really that people are releasing stuff before they know what the splits are and who owns what. And that just makes it made it really hard for the streaming services to figure out who to pay and when. And, as ownership changes and all that kind of stuff as well. And that's the big knot that the MLC is trying to constantly untangle, to match the rights so that the right people are getting paid, or so that we even know who's supposed to get paid. Because if you haven't registered your works, there's probably money sitting there waiting for you. It's the same thing on the Sound Exchange side of the business, where people had to make sure that Sound Exchange knew who they were and what their songs were so they could get paid. And now that's happening on the mechanical side too. So if anyone's involved with artists out there, songwriters particularly, or publishers or publishing admin, and you haven't registered for the Mechanical Licensing Collective, the one thing you can do to battle the black box is to make sure you register and make sure it's clear what the splits are and who owns the rights to the songs. So go and do that too. All right, another quick break. We have one more announcement, and let's talk about the live side of the business. There's some interesting news there. We'll be right back.
Did you know that this podcast is just one way music tectonics goes beneath the surface of music and tech? We know that innovation thrives on community and connection, so we bring innovators together with a free online event series we call Seismic Activity, and of course the Music Tectonics Conference every October in Los Angeles, and of course last but not least, meetups at major music industry events like the NAMM Show, South by Southwest, and Music Biz in Nashville. Stay on top of our schedule by getting the Music Tectonics newsletter right in your inbox. Sign up right now at musictectonics.com.
Okay, we're back. Tristra, I know we've been kind of jumping a lot between Billboard and Music Business Worldwide and Music Ally. We
just love them so much.
we do love them. We have some left of field stuff we publish as well in the scanner, the rock paper scanner, but they're definitely regulars. Live Nation reveals 20% growth for concert attendance in 2023. That's from, again, Stuart Dredge at Music Ally. Its concert attendance was up 20% year on year as more than 145 million fans attended over 50,000 events. That pushed the company's annual revenues up 36% to $22.7 billion and an operating profit of $1.07 billion. Whether you're a fan of Live Nation or not, it's a great sign to see live music is still very strong.
Yeah, it was 2023 was a boom year. I mean, the folks we talked to in the on sort of in the back end of live live events, the folks who listen to the tour managers and the bus rental companies, et cetera, already back in 2022, we're predicting an avalanche of a year. And it looks like, according to Live Nation's earnings, we've seen it. We're in a really interesting moment, though, where, a lot of the smaller venues, independent venues, smaller theaters are still struggling post-pandemic. In some countries, there's been more support than others. I mean, the U.S. is a kind of a mixed bag, and I think NEVA has still got a lot of work that they want to accomplish, and in order to support the sort of very beginning, which is what's often the starting block for a lot of artists, and or what's often a cornerstone of a scene or the musical identity or cultural identity of a community. And a lot of these places, at least in the UK and the US, are still facing pretty strong headwinds. And so we're seeing a lot of festival cancellations of independent festivals, a lot of venues really struggling or going under. And I think that should be of concern to everyone in the music business, because that is where artists even artists who are, deeply electronic have to forge their artistry. You can't really get great feedback from the internet consistently. Performing live is probably one of the best ways to hone your craft and to find your artistic vision. So I really hope we can maybe as an industry come together and figure out how to support these places that are so essential for folks who are developing, just starting out and trying to find their way as creatives. So
I don't know if it points to the same, the same market you're talking about, but in Music Business Worldwide's coverage of the latest earnings call from Live Nation, and not to focus too much there, but it is kind of an indication of, since it's such a large entity in the live side, it is an indication of sort of trends and how things are going in live. But Daniel Tenser at MBW said, Live Nation is surprised and thrilled. It's all in-ticket pricing is a success, and 3 other things we learned on the call. And those other things that they learned, one of them was about dynamic pricing, that they really see a lot of growth opportunity internationally as they play with dynamic pricing, which I don't know what to think of as a concert goer. Sometimes, it feels like Uber surge pricing or something like that. But it could reduce the amount of secondary market prices as well. But the second one, Live Nation sees demand shifting from stadiums to amphitheaters this year. So that's kind of interesting. Amphitheaters are still not small independent venues typically, but it's still interesting to see that there's kind of an interest in people getting slightly more intimate. I mean, stadiums are just so hard to even see what you're seeing, see what you're hearing, I guess. And they are also talking about spending another $300 million on new venues and renovations this year too. So clearly investing more in where live music's going. And, I don't know, I think people want experiences, right? They want to, that's kind of the human reaction to this sort of scrim that now exists in the digital experience of music between listeners and artists. And even if you're in a large venue, you're having an experience that, you're connecting with the people around you, getting a sense of sort of what the energy is of your fandom and that sort of thing. I personally like to go to very small venues and feel like I can really see the sweat beating on an artist's forehead, or hear them whispering, or see the interactions of the band members and things like that. But I don't know, just interesting stuff that there's some vibrancy in the live side. But as you said, whether that's spread evenly across venues, that's another story.
Yeah, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be, an either or. I mean, in some regards, it is a zero-sum game. But I think there's got to be a way to support these initiatives to, or these storied venues that have been like the linchpin of musical creativity in their town or in their city. So, looking forward to some more creative thinking in that area in the year to come.
All right, I've got a couple more articles we pulled from Rock Paper Scanner this week that are totally different. We kind of went very traditional with that first several things.
Yeah, exactly. We're keeping bread and just a nice little meat and potatoes, or tofu and potatoes.
We'll bring it a little further. The Music Ally reported the latest Roblox music experience comes from audio firm JBL. So super interesting to see music creation opportunities within Roblox.
Yeah. And I don't know if you saw they have a little demo video. It's very fun to once you get to the rest of it's just like, oh, it's a Roblox thing, whatever, like weird
Little games and-
weeble wobbles kind of blopping around. And then you see these but then when you get to the DAW part, it's really cool because it has these kind of like little blocks that folks can move around. They collect these sound blocks and then they can do really neat stuff with it. And that to me was super exciting and was probably the most compelling part of that, just from someone who's observed people playing Roblox more than I should ever have had to. But it is really neat to see that kind of, and it just seems like we're seeing these little bits and pieces that are going to come together to really encourage people to make music themselves, even if it's assembling it more collage-like from other parts.
Starting at a young age. I mean, you
totally.
might not, at age 8 or 10, you might not get your parents to buy you a teenage engineering synth or a drum machine or anything like that, but you're just wandering around Roblox picking up these little audio snippets and mixing them with other people in these in-world jukeboxes. And of course, it's great for JBL because then you can buy some JBL headphones and portable speakers as virtual items, according to Music Ally. So it's kind of fun for them to be able to mark that while they encouraging that kind of musical creativity that, nobody had to give these kids lessons to start dabbling with sound and playing with. So that's pretty cool. The other one, this is not like groundbreaking information, but we pulled a Business Insider article. There was a Vision Pro party in San Francisco, complete with people dancing and pinching in the air. And it's interesting to me to see as the Apple Vision Pro has been released, you start to see people reporting on people kind of out and about wearing them and the warnings of, oh no, don't wear them out and about.
Don't wear them in your Tesla. Like, I think that was a big story right after release. So some Tesla dude was driving around with a Vision Pro strapped to his face. Yeah.
Don't wear them crossing the street, etc. But I'm trying to see, like, is this going to be a Google Glass moment? It seems like it's got a tiny bit of that flavor, like your Tesla story. But it seems like people are, I think, Google Glass broke the ice on people kind of wearing something out in public. This one is way more visible than Google Glass in terms of what it looks like on your face. You look like a little android, ironically, wearing them
with electro eyes.
But I do still believe the Vision Pro is an early, it's a very early stage. Apple was not expecting this to be like a mass consumer hit where they're going to overtake Oculus on day one and then overtake iPhones on, day 100. But I do think that's the direction they're heading, is to have a whole new device that has a whole new set of interactions and experiences. And once again, use a very high-end hardware play to create a whole new market. And
it's happening at the same time as Meta just put out some of these a new version of, I think they've messed around with Ray-Bans before. That's like nothing new, but this new version has a bunch of multimodal AI in it, so it can theoretically identify your dog, though it may get confused with like a blueberry muffin or something like that. And there's been some like mixed reviews about how its multimodal capabilities actually work in real life. But I think that's another really interesting thing is not this, I think VR tended to think very immersively, and what Apple is suggesting with its spatial computing, this kind of like pass-through approach, and what some of these glasses suggest are that we'll have layers that are not, we're not completely shutting ourselves, or maybe we'll have like a variety of different, contexts. Like we shut ourselves down for some and we just go completely immersive. And then there's other times when we walk around with, glasses on our face that tell us things like that's a dog, or, that look, it's 3rd Street. And you're like, thanks, I didn't need to know that. But then you'll have like something where, you have a phone or a device that has other like extra compute or does other stuff. So in some ways I'm not seeing, everyone talks about replacement, and I think it might just be proliferation. Like we're going to start seeing, this explosion of different device formats for very different purposes and people expecting different things out of them.
Yeah, totally. So those are some of the articles in this week's Rock Paper Scanner. Find the link in our show notes. so that you can get the latest one. You would have also heard about a DAW that's in Apple Vision Pro that was also in the scanner. You would have heard about, not only do we have an article about cassettes making a comeback, specifically in Japan and elsewhere, but also floppy disks. There's a floppy disk music scene. Did you know that there's still a floppy disk music scene, Tristra?
I'm not surprised. I know people make cool stuff with Amigas still, so come on, there's got to be the floppy disks.
And lots of other articles, including we talk a lot about different industry revenue streams. ASCAP reported out on paying out a record amount. Hybe also had great numbers this year, and several other places too. So check out Rock Paper Scanner newsletter. Tristra, this is fun. I don't know. Maybe we should do it every quarter or so. I'm not sure.
Yeah, why not? Why not?
Yeah.
I'll pick, if only if I can pick my favorite totally weird story, like the, failed Willy Wonka AI exhibit in Scotland.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go check that.
If you know,
Actually, I got a plane to Scotland right now. I got to go check that out right now. Awesome. Thanks so much, Tristra. It's a blast talking to you.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Music Tectonics. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We have new episodes for you every week. Did you know we do free monthly online events that you, our lovely podcast listeners, can join? Find out more at musictectonics.com. And while you're there, look for the latest about our annual conference and sign up for our newsletter to get updates. Everything we do explores the seismic shifts that shake up music and technology, the way the Earth's tectonic plates cause quakes and make mountains. Connect with Music Tectonics on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. That's my favorite platform. Connect with me, Dmitri Vitsa, if you can spell it. We'll be back again next week, if not sooner.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.